that they have had no beginning in time. There's no time when there wasn't a physical universe. It's always been there, and it will always be there. This is the vesture of God, if you will, is that He sustains infinite worlds, and that all of us are a radiation, an emanation, he says. We are all emanations of God. But he said that just as the sunlight that comes off the physical sun is no loss to the sun, we don't rob God of anything. This is pure mercy and an expression of that He gives us existence. And he says, Abdu'l-Baha says, that your thought, your consciousness, if you think about it, is something emanating from God. Within it, it has all the potential understanding of everything. But it needs turning. It needs that the lower self, the outer mind, so to speak, the outer thought patterns. And Abdu'l-Baha says, you are your thought. What do you think about all day? You know? You bring yourself to account each night. He said, what were you thinking about all day? What did you think about? Shoghi Effendi says, if you think and feel negatively about other people, you open yourself to the dark forces of materialism and the kind of animal nature that you're trying to get away from. That's such a helpful letter. I saw that and I thought, wow, thinking and feeling negatively opens you to dark forces. How much of a time do we spend during the day being upset with other people, you know? That there's nothing we can do really about it. You can pray for them, but you can't. Just being upset with them doesn't help any. It makes me feel good because I put them down in my mind, you know. I'm better than they are. And that's also a dead end. You're not better than anybody else. The only person you can be better than is the person you are right now. That's what Shoghi Effendi says we're judged on. We go to the next world, we've been given so much capacity. What did we do with that capacity? Not how did I do with my capacity compared to what she did with her capacity. That's not the game. We only are responsible for what we've been given, and we've all been given a different measure, if you will, of capacity. So we can't say, well, I'm the best Baha'i I see around. I doubt many of us say that, but sometimes we look around and we say, well, I'm behaving myself a bit better than the rest of these people, or I know more about the teachings than they do. And it's all very relative. Then he's looking at us, and we think we're better than somebody else, but he says, well, you've been given more capacity. So Bill Sears used to explain it this way. He'd say, here's a guy who's been given capacity to count to 100. And here's a guy that's been given capacity, a soul that's been capacity to count to 20. And the guy who can count to 100 has learned to count to 35. And he's feeling pretty good about that. Because he sees that this other little guy next to him is only counting to 18. But that's the one who has capacity to count to 20. So relatively, this guy that's been given less capacity is fulfilling more of his potential, and that's pleasing in the eyes of God, and he's rewarded for that. This other guy is busy thinking he's better, and he's meanwhile missing out on another, 65% of his capacity because he's comparing himself with others. We can't compare ourselves with others. That's why we have Abdu'l-Baha. If we compare ourselves with Abdu'l-Baha, well, we're already feeling like there's something else to do, you know? Exemplar, what does that mean? How do we do that? How do we do that? So, universe has no beginning in time, no end in time. That alone blows our brains out. I mean, you have people who say, well, I can't understand God. I try to understand God, but I can't understand anything about that. That's right. You can't even understand physical creation. It has no limit. And then he says, space-wise, there's no limit to it. It goes forever. How do you imagine a physical? Do you remember there was the Hubble in the 90s? They found a black kind of space in the sky that they couldn't see clusters in with the Hubble telescope. And some people begged, they said, let us have a special, 10 days to survey with the Hubble. We turn the Hubble's powers on and we go deeply, twice as far as we've ever gone. So they did that. And at the end of it, they started analyzing all this. There were tens of thousands of clusters. There are galaxies with endless numbers of planets. In other words, whatever they'd seen in this part of the universe, when they went very, very deep, there it is, repeated again. It goes on and on and on. And what do we know from there's hints in the teachings. He says the motivation of creation is to fill man with love and prepare him to live a life in the kingdom. That sounds very biblical or something, but it's what we're here for. We're supposed to become transformed. We live off of, from the time we're born, we live off acquired knowledge. We borrow knowledge. We borrow it. First of all, we have our sentient experiences. Through our eyes and our ears, we gather, we see. When you watch a baby grow, you see how this thing is, they attract things and they begin to place, because we've been given understanding and reasoning power. And that's the way we advance spiritually. Not by believing fantasies and impossible things, but by using our reasoning power and the effect that the words of God have on that reasoning power. Acquired knowledge, borrowed knowledge, builds up a whole system in us. Why does the prophets say that knowledge can be the greatest veil keeping us from God? Because we get proud of our acquired, borrowed knowledge, which we really don't understand very well. Now you're saying, the tablet of Baha'u'llah says, no beginning and no end. Well, what about the Big Bang? That we believe in science too, don't we? We don't believe in dogma of science. We don't believe in theories of science. We watch to see what gets confirmed. Now there's a whole group of scientists that are starting to say, we don't understand the Big Bang in the same way. There's got to have been something before that. There can't have been nothing that suddenly exploded into this entire universe. Rationally, it doesn't settle well. So, okay, please don't go out here saying I'm speaking against the Big Bang. What I'm saying is that you have to weigh all the science, real science, and true religion, Abdu'l-Baha says, are in complete accord. Because they're both coming from the same source. God has given us the rational power and capacity to penetrate and understand the mysteries of existence, material existence. He's also given us that capacity through the Word of God to penetrate divine realities. And all of it is highly organized and ordered and reasonable. But we've been raised with an overdose of materialism and material outlook. And our school system, because religions have become corrupted and people can't believe in the nonsense that has been added to the divine revelations. Revelation's clean and attractive in itself. That's why Baha'u'llah says, look at the heart of the revelations of the past. You'll see that there's one spirit in the whole thing. It's all based on love. It's all based, and yet, what are the religions doing now? Anything but love, your priests blessing soldiers on one side of the war and others blessing the soldiers of the other country, and like Christian nations and Muslim nations, everybody clashing. It has nothing to do with the religion of God. That's why Abdu'l-Baha says, look at it. He says, if it doesn't promote love and unity, better to have no religion. We have to watch our own faith if it doesn't become a source of differences. If we're not grounded and deepened in the cause, there are grave differences. We are more tests to each other than we need to be. He says the only way to overcome this is to not look at each other's shortcomings. Look at our own shortcomings. Never look at the shortcomings of others. Just, if they come into your mind, put them out. How can you do that? He says we have to love all mankind. Fortunately, I haven't seen any place where he says we have to like everybody, because it's people with terrible characters and difficulties that are difficult to like. And yet he says that you're supposed to view them the way God views them. They're in a process. They're not developed yet. They haven't the qualities that they need yet, but potentially they have them. So one has to see the promise in other people and address that. And addressing that awakens a kind of hope in another soul. If you're really seeing them as spiritual beings, maybe they start thinking, maybe I am a spiritual being. Wow. How does that work, you know? This is true. The Corinne True, who was one of the early hands of the cause in America, and the main builder, power behind the Wilmette Temple, building the temple. She was the pusher that was pushing and getting it going and keeping it, sustaining it spiritually, if you will. And Millie Collins and Siegfried Schoflacher, who were two other hands of the cause, by their financial contributions, moved the thing forward. All the Baha'is were contributing, but it needed great wealth to build this house of worship. Anyway, she was on pilgrimage with her daughters in 1909, before Abdu'l-Baha came to America. And they had a wonderful pilgrimage. She's written a beautiful account of it, and it's thrilling. And just as she was leaving, the last message of meeting with the Master, she said, Abdu'l-Baha turned to us and he said, I want you to see every soul that you meet as a letter from your beloved. Everybody we meet potentially has a message, has that reality, has a nature, divine nature, that if it's awakened, it will teach us something. It will be a gift to us. So, if you have a letter from the beloved, he said, if it's stained with coffee, or if it's dirty, or if it's ripped, or if it's crumpled, because it's the beloved, you don't care about that kind of thing. You're wanting to see what he says. What's the message there from the beloved? That's what's important to you. And somehow that suggests an attitude we should have to others. The patience we need to have, the compassion we need to have, and also the hope that we can see something in them. And the unity of the Baha'is is not so much deciding to get along with each other and forgive each other's shortcomings, as it is, and Horace Holly stressed this in a marvelous talk back in the 50s that I heard, it's all of us moving closer to God and seeing the qualities and attributes of spiritual attributes in each other. That is the great bonding element in the Baha'i community. And it's that which creates the magnet that'll draw the masses to us, not formulas and statements we might learn. It's all right to begin with, we have to do that kind of thing, but how do we turn the fire up? How do we raise ourselves, you know? I'm sorry, I don't mean to be burdening you. I hope I'm not burdening you with this kind of smart talk, but it's pretty late in the game. Pretty late in our lives already, in your lives already. If you're thinking of these things clearly, or if you haven't and you can focus more attention on them, it will bring terrific rewards. Do you think God needs us to teach His cause? He doesn't need us to teach His cause. But we need to teach His cause if we're going to move forward spiritually. It's that very allowance He's given in this day of God. He said, instead of having clergy do it, who messed up and mess up always, He's put this pastoral duty on each of us to pass the knowledge, proclaim the existence of the cause to other people. In one place he says, in the Wings, he says, proclaim it to everyone. If they respond, if they show interest, teach them. This is an interesting variation on how we understand proclamation and teaching. Proclaim means to mention the cause. Make somebody understand there is such a thing as Baha'u'llah's message, and it has a hope for mankind. But they ignore it. Okay, leave them to themselves, pray for them, he said. But if they show interest, then explain more to them. Kind of a basic element. But Abdu'l-Baha has also said, he says, if you're going to see a person only once, mention the cause. If you're going to see them on a continual basis, they just moved into the apartment next to you, don't hit them right away with that. Live the life, he says. Create confidence in them. So it is with our association. And if we draw people to the faith so that they're attracted at the beginning when they really don't know us, it still needs a period. You know yourselves, your own experience, awakening as Baha'is. It needs a lot of support from other people. It needs support from a few other Baha'is that take interest in us. It's so significant. If we feel that somebody else has hope in us, besides our mummies and our daddies, who usually are praying us through that whole difficult period of adolescence, my God, to get to the other side. And we have to make the faith our own. That's another challenge we have if we happen to be Baha'is all days. We have to somehow recognize, this is my faith. It's not just my parents' faith. It's wonderful, it's their faith. This is my faith. This is the means of my personal transformation. There is no God but God. God is God. And we have to worship Him. And He is so blessed and merciful that He's given us messengers of God, manifestations to turn to, because there's nothing else to turn to. That's the ultimate, the last tree on the horizon, he says, it's the manifestation. You can't go beyond that. And the manifestations themselves say they're thunderstruck. They can't turn back and see what's behind them, motivating them. They understand everything about creation. Have you seen those teachings? Abdu'l-Baha talks about it. He says, if you learn a truth on one level of existence, you can pass it up the hierarchy of understandings. For instance, we have a soul. That soul is regulating and sustaining our physical body. We got it all backwards because that's the way we've been taught. Abdu'l-Baha says, is matter primary? Does it then produce spirit? Or does spirit control and organize matter? In one letter, Shoghi Effendi says, matter is a certain form of spiritual energy. There isn't really matter in the sense of something independent of the control of God, just there casually, somehow, miraculously. The possibility of this universe being the way it is, somebody was saying, one of the writers said, is like the possibility of an explosion in a print shop, that in the course of the explosion, an encyclopedia is created and printed and bound and falls down with all the... There's so much more intelligence behind all of this, I lost my trail. Where was I going? Can you tell me?
What was the name of that compilation that you were sharing?
The name of it is The Importance of Deepening Our Knowledge and Understanding of the Faith. It's been in print. I think you can find it online too. It's in compilation of compilations that the various compilations of the house were organized.
You were speaking about understanding on different levels.
Okay, oh yeah. Okay, so we got the body informed by the soul. The soul actually is a maintenance. One level of the soul, which is an autonomic, we're unconscious of it. It knows the whole system, and it knows the pattern, and it maintains the pattern of our physical being, and moves us back to health when we get sick. But this is a power that's in us, and is sustaining us, maintaining us, so to speak. So that Beside that, we have a level of consciousness in our own being, which is aware, an immediate knowledge of our own selves, which is a gift from God, a marvelous gift from God. So that you know when you're happy and when you're sad, you know when you're hot and when you're cold, you know when you need to cover up and get warm, or you're going to get sick. All kinds of things that you understand, and nobody has to teach you those things in a sense. This is a kind of immediate knowledge, intuitive knowledge. It works also at spiritual levels, that you're able to confirm. You meditate about what you read, and you confirm in yourself that this is true. This strikes me as true. Is this true? Do I understand this correctly? Who are we talking to, Abdullah says, when we ask all these questions? Shall I go to Miami on the weekend? No. There's the pros and the cons, and we work it out and we make a decision. We're consulting with our own inner being, so to speak. Okay, this is one kind of knowledge that we have of our own. He says that the manifestation has another consciousness. Besides his individual consciousness, he has a body and he has awareness of himself, but he has another level of consciousness that's beyond anything we can really understand and conceive. And in that consciousness, we are the cells of his spiritual consciousness. He's maintaining every one of us and is aware of our condition simultaneously, which sounds really difficult for us because we don't have that kind of knowledge. But in the Agan, Baha'u'llah says, all things live, move, and have their being in the manifestation of God. You don't have to go searching for him. He's the very pulse. He's closer to you than your lifeblood. He's sustaining you. And yet, notwithstanding how intimate his knowledge and awareness and immediacy with us is, how far we've wandered away from him. How much we think we are our own boss, and why we think that's important. Egotism and passion, physical passion, central passion, are the two great barriers to our spiritual growth. And he says free will has been given to us to choose to defeat those. The Bab says, free will has been given you to choose the will of God. Any other use of it is illicit. That's stuck. He says, well, I'm my own boss, I can do what I want, why not, you know? Yep, with dire consequences. How do we rein all this? Abdullah talks about it, tells again, he says that our physical being is like a horse, and the spiritual being is the rider and the horse. If the rider has tamed the horse, it's very useful. He can use it to make trips. He can move faster than without it. But on the other hand, if the horse is completely untamed, it's a big danger that he's going to go and dump you off somewhere where you don't need to be and carry you into some circumstance which is entirely unacceptable and will endanger you. How do we tame the wild beast inside of us? How do we stop enjoying its company? It's really, the nature is so evil that we find ourselves taking joy in somebody else's suffering because they've bothered us. They're a neighbor that's constantly been a nuisance. Now look what's happened to them. That's true. Kind of, it's so far from what the Master is calling us to. But it's very common because we live with it. Until we drop the body away. Now, how do we raise ourselves in different degrees of consciousness? Because the manifestation of God has knowledge, immediate knowledge of everyone that lives on the planet, and he has a universal awareness beyond that we can't estimate or measure at all. He's able to prescribe the laws and circumstances where humanity can be improved and make the next stage in its development. He says it's on that basis that he's able, because he's aware of all of us. Okay, say we were Christians or we were Muslims, and we pray to God, and we had faith, we all pray to God. But how is God aware of everything that we ask? That's another miracle. He does it through the manifestation. The manifestation is the immediate personality, Abdu'l-Baha says, is in the manifestation, not in the essence of God. You can't understand anything about personality. Although he says he has a mind and a will and an understanding of his own of everything, the Creator. But you can't get there. But he's given us the manifestation of God, and he says his presence is the greatest bounty of God when he's here with us. That's the presence of God. That's the knowledge of God. That's what real knowledge, that we are told we're created to know and love God. It means know and love Him through the manifestation. Because you can't get to the essence. You can't, it doesn't fit. The absolute doesn't come into the limited version that we are. But everything that will bring us joy and contentment and happiness and supreme knowledge and universal awareness of the realities of existence, he says, comes through the spirit of faith. The spirit of faith, he says, is the breath of the divine spirit breathed into the human spirit. Friends, as far as I can see, that doesn't happen unless we attend to the Word of God. We read it, we study it, we think about it. And if we look at it and it seems boring and repetitive, then we have to worry about that a little bit. Read it and think it again. And unfortunately, we have Abdu'l-Baha's talks to start off, and then his tablets, Baha'u'llah's commentaries, and we have the words, we have prayers and meditation. Such an acme of spiritual bounty. I must say, when I read it at first, I said, it's all saying the same thing. Yes, that's true. But I didn't say it with the right attitude, that it's all saying the same thing. It just seemed, it can't penetrate anything here. What is this? So then I go back to Shoghi Effendi. Then I read Shoghi Effendi, I get all excited. Then I read Abdu'l-Baha, and I could read his prayers, seem more accessible and more human. And then gradually now, I love this book, Prayers and Meditation, so we've never had that kind of revelation from the prophets of God explaining about their own suffering and difficulties. He reveals his history, his spiritual history, in the meditations that are there. But instead of that, we open the book and it says, "Thou seest me in my prison house." Oh, this is not for me. Seest me in my prison house. That's his prayer. I don't know. Let me find something that applies to me. Go back and study those things. Look at what he says about his own experiences and what he's put himself through, so that you can become an eternal light. So that you can become aware of the greatness of the God of the universe, so to speak. I promised to read something and then I put it away. Sorry. It'll be fine. It makes a nice thing to end with here. You can see if you have any you want to add or you want to talk about. This is to the friends in Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is, is the province where Tabriz is, where the Bab was martyred. Praise be to God that the spirit of the holy writings and tablets which have been revealed in this wondrous dispensation, concerning matters of major or minor importance, whether essential or otherwise, related to the sciences and the arts, to natural philosophy, literature, politics, or economics, have so permeated the world that since the inception of the world, in the course of past dispensations and bygone ages, nothing like it has ever been seen or heard. Indeed, if an avowed follower of Baha'u'llah were to immerse himself in and fathom the depths of the ocean of these heavenly teachings, and with the utmost care and attention deduce from each of them the subtle mysteries and consummate wisdom that lie enshrined therein, such a person's life, materially, intellectually, and spiritually, will be safe from toil and trouble, and unaffected by setbacks and perils, or any sadness or despondency.
Should we read that last paragraph one more time? That last like 3
The last line, okay. I'll go back to, indeed, if an avowed follower of Baha'u'llah, I think we're all avowed followers, we state we believe in Baha'u'llah. If he were to immerse himself in and fathom the depths of the ocean of these heavenly teachings, and with utmost care and attention deduce from each of them the subtle mysteries and consummate wisdom that lie enshrined therein, such a person's life materially, intellectually, and spiritually will be safe from toil and trouble, and unaffected by setbacks and perils, or any sadness or despondency. What a life-shaking promise that is, you know. And how important it is when you're going to form a family. You know, lots of times the Baha'is, born from Baha'i families, are going to slip away for a while. When they get married, well, suddenly they're faced with the challenge of marriage, and that alone is world-shaking. You really need the teachings for that. Abdu'l-Bahá says if one, in a partnership, in marriage, if one person loves the other person more than they love God, it will be cause of difficulties for both of them. The idea is two lovers of God join in marriage. That's the pattern. Then you've got the resources then to somehow survive the difficulties of marriage. Marriage is full of difficulties. I mean, it's not easy. My wife is not here to tell you her side of the story. We've been married 54 years now, so. And all of our parents and grandparents on all sides are divorced, have been divorced. So that must say something about the Baha'i teachings that has helped us to stay together, survive all of the battles we've had. And first month of marriage, you know, had some difficulties right away. We said, look, this isn't going to work if the word divorce is in our vocabulary. It's not going to work. It'll be over before it starts. So ban the word divorce. We don't go there at all. You can battle it out, but have our say and understand each other as best we can. And we pray together every day. Read something from the writings in the mornings. But it's created to help stimulate the soul. And then you have the question of how to raise children. You want to have attained to some kind of spiritual unity of vision, you know, before this, so that you'll have that unity to deal with the children. Otherwise, that's also sourcing. And we all bring to us the acquired knowledge of our family experience that we had. Disciplined or undisciplined or whatever it happened to be. And think of there's so many of the people that are out there that don't know about the faith yet, and whose parents are drug addicts or drunkards or mentally deranged. It's really, the situation of humanity is so desperate. So we want to go and help them, but we also have to change ourselves, so to speak. We have to try to get really serious with ourselves, you know. You just save yourself so much grief if you can turn on the concentration, so to speak, a little bit more. Yes, sir.
If someone's confronted with, one or two major obstacles that they feel are the big things they need to get over as part of this process, what are the ways to start preparing to get over those obstacles, especially if you feel like you've tried to do it a number of times without success?
And fail, yeah. Well, I think the most important thing is to develop a habit, a life of prayer, or use prayer. The other thing is being willing to humiliate yourself, because we don't like to humiliate ourselves, but we have to say to God, look, I failed again. I tried to solve this. I identified, we all know the major problems in our lives and we need to change. We know, but we usually say to God, can I take care of this one first and that I'll deal with that, but it's too difficult right now for me to look at that. Or I always fail with that one, so let me find one I can be successful, be encouraged by. Abdullah says the same test will come back over and over again. And the soul will decide this time I'm really going to make an effort and everything's going to be all right and I won't repeat the actions or thoughts that I shouldn't have. So it may be at the thought level, maybe at the physical action level, whatever. You can be sure it's coming from ego and sensuality. Those are the two sources of our difficulties. Then he says you fail, and so you resolve again, and you fail, and then you resolve again. He told this to Dr. Getzinger, Lua Getzinger's husband. And then you fail again, and finally you get this, this is impossible. I cannot. Why can't I break this habit or this thing that I do that I shouldn't do? And you get to the desperate stage, Abdullah says, very an important stage, where you say to God, I have no capacity, I have no ability to overcome. I'm trying, but I can't. If you don't help me with this, I will have failed forever. Then he said, then God takes that problem away and gives you a new one after the next stage of it. But it requires that humility, which is really a kind of a humiliation before God. Not that he wants us to, that's why he says, never confess your sins to others. This is not appropriate. He wants us to be noble beings. But in ourselves, we have to know ourselves well enough to realize that if he acts through us, it'll solve the problem. But getting to the point where we say, can you help me with this? Because I can't, I'm not managing, is a very important stage. Otherwise, we kind of feel ourselves, well, I can take care of this. Yeah, sure.
And so when you stage after that, and I say this because I recently had this experience that you're mentioning, when I felt like I kind of got to the point where I was doing that. And then, of course, it happened again anyway. And I thought to myself, well, wait a minute, I'm not sure there is a stage after this stage. It's like, well, you know, I guess you just keep going until it works. Right? What else is that?
Important is every time you fall down to get up again. And then also to begin to lean. He says, life too difficult for you, Abdullah says, he says, lean on me. It's a beautiful phrase he says in words. Lean on, Abdullah is there, lean on. His words, his encouragement, his guidance is there to help us. None of it is easy. That's the substance of life, is this struggle, you know. Would-be warriors, but the odds are very great. The thing is, the outcome is terrific. Not too many souls in any stage of civilization manage this. We are not many souls. We're still just a handful, you know. We're not 1% of humanity yet. He can change us for the rocks, he says, for the pebbles. Or maybe he already has and we're the pebbles, who knows, I don't know. But, you know. Let us prove the guardian wrong about mediocrity. Let us be something, making efforts to match the standards of the faith and see the results that will become evident, I think, very quickly. We all know the Baha'is that we're so pleased to see that they have that kind of spirit, you know, that it just encourages us to see that we feel good about them. There's homogenized sweetness and kindness. That's what the people are looking for. If they see that in us, they'll be happy to give up the relationships with things which are inappropriate and not really moving them forward. What do we think? We are what we think. Just make a review tonight of what you thought about all day. Where your thoughts are directed. That's another thing, this transformation of consciousness is. But that's why you think, that's why you read the writings a bit. And then you have to meditate and think about them during the day. Maybe you don't have a lot of time, but you have a couple moments when you're walking or read something else, and you can have a hidden word written, a new hidden word every day in your pocket, and just take it out and try to memorize, try to think about it during the day. I used to tell the gardeners in Haifa that they worked hard physically, but every once in a while they had to stop to drink some water. When you drink some water, read the hidden word again. Think about it. They were tendering, tendering their labors on the holy gardens. It's an incredible kind of pastime.
What if you enjoy reading the writings, but it takes a lot of energy, so sometimes you're just tired of, in a good way, It's kind of like eating too much delicious food. It's like
well, yeah. if you have that problem, be moderate. Moderation means. The youth would say, moderation, we're supposed to be moderate. I said, is moderate halfway between what Baha'u'llah says and what the world is requiring of us? Is that middle? Reminds us of a verse in the New Testament where he says that the Lord will spew the lukewarm from his mouth. Moderation is what Baha'u'llah says. Please don't go further than that. That would be fanatic. Moderation is obedience to everything Baha'u'llah says. That's hard enough. In that sense. But you have to measure. You have to I think you have to be careful. There is such a thing even mentioned in Letters to the Guardian about spiritual indigestion. You can overdo it. Just like you can overeat. But when you're, don't stop before you're satisfied. I mean, in that sense, you need enough so that you begin. You can't use the excuse that it isn't pleasant to me. I don't feel to pray, so should I pray? Yes. At least the obligatory ones, you want to be sure you stick with it. Because the fact that you don't feel any attraction to it is a sign that you're not in a good spiritual state. Otherwise, you take flight right away when you look at the words and think about the meanings of it. Immediately stirs you up. But you're right. Don't overdo it.
I mean, like, if you spend most of your time doing like intellectual stuff, like if you're a student reading a lot, that takes.
You're already exhausted, yeah.
Your mind is just kind of tired, and when you read the writings, or when I read the writings, I try to think about them, and that takes more mental capacity. I mean, sometimes you can just look at the words without thinking about it, and it makes you feel good too. But it takes like mental energy.
I have great intentions to study the writings. I love to study the writings. But in your 70s, when you study the writings, you start reading. At least my case is I can manage about 3 paragraphs, and then I'm falling asleep. So I have to reread the 3 paragraphs a couple times and try to hold on to it. Fortunately, I've got some background of having read for 50 years before that. But you want to get started as soon as you can. The verses inform us of the meaning of the verses. The verses reveal the meanings of the verses. In other words, the more the breadth of reading that you do, study that you do, you find that, this is clarified over here, and this is clarified there. It happens with the Master, it happens with Shoghi Effendi. Also, he said, if they read my writings, they'll understand what I mean by the terms epoch and era and things. Because he's defined them at some point. He doesn't go back and refine them over and over, define them over and over. He's So you need to read the whole opus of Shoghi, which is a challenge in itself, but marvelous. These are, he said something interesting about economy. He said that it's too early, that we don't have the development of Baha'i economy, economic principles yet. He says it requires the minds of economists to think about and absorb the principles Baha'u'llah has revealed about economy. Then gradually those principles will crystallize in the consciousness of those economists and produce results. So something happens to you that the acquired knowledge is like sod, and it's not active knowledge. It's a kind of fake knowledge, and most of us are filled with it. I mean, we are filled with it all the time, but we try to replace that with the words of the divine verses. The verses have a power to transform and crystallize the murk of our consciousness and our thoughts into something light, refracting and light reflecting. Think of crystals. The crystal is not there. It's a kind of a murky solution. You can't. Nothing's there, and yet suddenly it comes alive. And Shoghi Effendi uses that example over and over. The crystallization in consciousness of the revelation of Baha'u'llah. It's like salt. You put it in there. Finally, in our consciousness, we absorb enough of it, and it begins to crystallize and give us vision and give us the means of capturing light.
I have a few questions actually. If I could ask you like 3 questions.
Please.
You were saying earlier about near-death experiences, about how people they pass away and then they can see the room around them, kind of like an out-of-body experience.
Yeah.
Science explains those near-death experiences as DMT and other chemicals being released by your brain, combined with the oxygen deprivation and all that other stuff, which causes those near-death experiences. How do you think this affects people's perceptions on those experiences? Say, a Baha'i who's very learned in medical practice, do you think they would kind of discount their experience because of their education and stuff like that, or?
I think probably you'd need to consult Baha'i medical personnel to see that. I've talked to some of them who say we've been aware of these things for a long time. There are attempts to explain it chemically, and I mean, if you're a hardbound materialist, you desperately want to explain it in any terms. You can't allow the existence of a spiritual realm that's fictitious. That it's like it unsettles your whole worldview, which is materialistic completely.
So it would be kind of like flawed thinking for them to kind of discount it as...
So they have to find some explanation for it. Have you read anything of Rupert Sheldrake? He's an interesting fellow. He's just given a TED Talk last year, but I think the TED Talks have removed it from their records because he talks about Sheldrake. He's a Cambridge scientist. He's a lot of dealing with chemistry and other things like that. He's posed certain morphic fields of consciousness which help in the evolution and development of attitudes of the human race. It's a whole new way of thinking. He says, science has 2 aspects to it. On one hand, it has the spirit of investigation, scientific investigation, rational observations, and arriving at conclusions through research. And on the other hand, he said it has a whole area of dogmatism that is accepted scientific theories that are still theories, but that have been swallowed whole, so to speak. Let's say Big Bang, which you couldn't open your mouth and say anything about Big Bang, and that is finished. But now there's new suggested experiences that are being applied, and new ways of reading the same experience.
Or the same data and stuff like
You know, Shoghi Effendi says, if it appears to us that some of the teachings are not in conformity with science, he said it's usually, you have to wait a time. You don't have to push it in people's faces, you know, but you yourself have a certain reservations. This is going to come about. I mean, the knowledge of the manifestation is just so far superior to any single scientist. If they've said something clearly, we've got the statements of every planet has its creatures, whose numbers no man can compute. Every planet in the universe has creatures. And Abdu'l-Baha says those creatures, it means creatures with volition. Creatures with volition are, to some degree, some of the animal species, but the human species is and so on. Then he talks about the infinite, uncalculable number of manifestations of God who appear to the creatures in all the worlds of God. That's the system of God. Everywhere throughout the universe is manifestations, educating, raising. And in the next world, the same thing. The Baha'is will have roles as teachers and help to be raising souls up. If you've been involved in helping regenerate souls and awaken them, you're going to do the same thing in the next world. You have that opportunity. One of the hands of the cause, Abdu'l-Baha saw them after they passed away in the next world, in a dream. And this man was all excited. Abdu'l-Baha said he was corpulent in this world, and he was corpulent in that world as well. And he says, I've just been diffusing the divine fragrances in this district that I'd never been to before. And it has new species of food, and it was such an exciting place for him to be. And then he said, then some other souls showed up, and he was distracted, and that was the end of it. So you say to yourself, wow, that world is a world that's very complete. Abdu'l-Baha says this world corresponds with that world. That's the real world, and everything here is a reflection of it. That is, there are houses, mansions, communities, universities, schools. Talks about the children that are not born. You know, give me a term.
Unborn.
Stillborn, unborn, aborted children. Okay, they go to the next world. Abdu'l-Baha says you'll find them fully grown there. They were educated in the schools of the kingdom. They go without markings. We all acquire markings here because of this lower nature we have. We have to struggle with it or something. But they go in a pure form. Think about it. Probably more of them going than we're going. I mean, how many children are lost or deliberately lost? So what are schools in the kingdom? So the schools in the kingdom are fairies are going to educate them or something? No, souls that have gone from this life that have knowledge of that are going to have tasks. You've heard of Howard Colby Ives, the book Portals to Freedom. He was one of a non-Baha'i that was in association with Abdu'l-Baha and became a Baha'i eventually. He'd been a Unitarian minister, and toward the end of his life, he and his wife were terrific itinerant teachers. Shoghi Effendi praises them. They live in a car and go from town to town and take menial jobs behind the scenes in restaurants, usually washing dishes, so that they can rent a hotel room and have Baha'i meetings in the evenings. They did that for years. He eventually became ill. He had some nerve illness that gave him pain in his whole body. He went blind. This man, who was such a wonderful teacher, is unable to do anything. His wife, Mabel, one day she just couldn't bear it anymore. She went in the other room and she said, Abdu'l-Baha, can't you take him? What's the point of him staying here in this state? And then she prayed and she calmed down. Resign yourself to the will of God, so to speak. Then she went back to see Howard again, and Howard said, Mabel, said Abdu'l-Baha came, I saw him here, he was in the room with me. And he said, if you want to go now, I'll take you. But he said, I'm hoping you'll linger a bit longer because I'm preparing you to be a professor in the University of the Kingdom. And Howard says, I'll stay here. But these are little stories. Break our imaginations with regard to some emptiness that we're going to go to. You know, we're not going to sit on cotton candy playing ukuleles. The Baha'i vision of the next world. And we have infinite worlds to move through. And
I was really looking forward to that too.
where do you? Well, each one to his own heaven. You know, there's all those worlds. Abdullah says the ones that don't turn to God, they live in a world of their own imagination. Some may be pleasant or not. I don't know. You look at the holy books about that subject too. That's a bit. If you want to see something interesting, maybe I shouldn't even say this. Look at YouTube, near-death experiences of hell. Look at the expression on the people's faces who've been through some of that. It's not all happy. Anyway, you had another question.
Yes, sir, I did. Alright. The second one had to do with we all have certain limits of capacity with, you are your thoughts, basically. Since, we all have certain levels of capacity, others with what would be like self-perceived, or if it's actually that case of low spiritual capacity, some of those people seek spiritual experience-inducing substances like hallucinogenic mushrooms, or like the Amazon drug known as ayahuasca. And I was wondering what your perspective was on this, as long as they were done for purely spiritual intentions, not like, just doing it to do it. Doing it for like a spiritual, a spiritual question, seeking an answer.
Well, in the Baha'i teachings, in the Kitab Yaqtas, it says don't use any substance that causes a change in your natural mental condition. This is intended to happen by free will choosing to seek the knowledge of God in the verses of God, and that's how those things should happen. So whether that's really spirituality or not is not clear, but I would say from a Baha'i point of view, those practices were the same as people taking marijuana. Apart from that, and trying to have another experience, so to speak. But it's supposed to happen through the choices of your own free will, unaffected by drugs or alcohol, something that alters your mind. The same with certain psychic practices that Abdul-Baha warned the people against as well. Meditation is reflecting and thinking about the meaning of the verses of God. One of the old saints in French history said you can hull peas sitting in the sun or in the shade. We have to live our lives, but we've got a choice whether to do it in the sunlight or do it in the shadows. Hull peas we have to. We're all faced with the challenge. So important is work, that Shoghi Effendi said that Baha'u'llah said that even if you inherit wealth, you're still required to have a profession and work. Because that's part of the dynamic of transformation. It's not. So then what's the goal in acquiring wealth? So that we can sit and do nothing, lie in a hammock and drink beverages. That's for the next world, I think. It talks about couches and drinks. And huris. This word huri is in the Quran and also is in the Quran. It's about the reward of those that struggle for God. The struggle for God is really the transformation of our own personal character. The Holy War, Muhammad says that the holy war is the wars that they've had, but the most holy war is the war on the plane of the soul between the man's higher nature and his ego. That's a more desperate battle. Big battle. If you overcome that, well, the rewards are very great. Add a third one.
Yes, sir. And then when you were saying God sustains and is aware of all, since God is aware of all, would that mean that God is more of a sentient, spiritual energy rather than a physical entity, in your opinion? Since God's able to be, I mean, God's even in this room being aware of, what we're doing.
I think that, in the Baha'i writings, it just simply states clearly there's no way to define God and to put those kind of limitations on him. He's certainly not a physical being in any way, and not human form, or at least this is what I understand by the paragraphs that you'll find in the dispensation of Baha'u'llah written by the guardian Shoghi Effendi. He talks about it. It's not anthropomorphic. We have no concept of God as being anthropomorphic, even though the representation of God that we are allowed is the manifestation of God, and he has a physical being, and he will have a spiritual being that we can see in the next world according to the degrees of closeness that we have. In other words, attaining the presence of God, Shoghi Effendi says, in the next world is attaining to the presence of the manifestation or messengers of God. In fact, Baha'u'llah in one place says that the souls of the believers, when they go to the next world, they will be ushered into the presence of the messengers and prophets of God, who will inquire of them that which they've suffered in the path of God. Friends, if you haven't had any suffering, it may be a short interview. But if you can say that your whole life you've been trying to serve the cause, you have a lot to talk about.
I had a question on the subject of the primal will. Yeah. I've been very interested in wondering more about what it is. And I know that's a really deep subject, so if you can't explain it all, well, I know it's a lot to explain, but would you have like a book or something to recommend?
No, I mean, I don't understand it. I can repeat a few things from the writings about it, maybe help you one.
Okay.
The Bob's writings, he talks about the primal point. Point is the beginning of everything. He says everything is generated from a point, and the point becomes, in some mysterious way, becomes the point of a pen as well. So that point is moving, and as it moves, it inscribes knowledge. Knowledge flows from it. All of the creation also flows from that. And the creation is the ink. But the movement of the pen describes the forms that the ink will take. So the nature of the manifestation of God is, he says, he is the primal point which has a twofold station. One is the station of the individual manifestation of God, who has a physical body, more refined than ours, but still basically a physical body, but because of the nature of his spirit, it's cleansed, it's subtler in every respect. The Law is Zuhur, if you can find that, the tablet of the manifestation. You don't have it published in a recent translation. There's some provisional translations there. He talks about that. He said that the manifestation of God is like a ring that God puts on his finger. It represents him. Then he says, okay, that has that individual soul and the super soul, which is this power that encompasses all of us and sustains all of us. That's that role. And then he says it has another level, which is this Mashiach Avaliya, the primal will that you're asking about. That is the the birthright, the identity, the inner identity of every manifestation of God throughout the universe has this. He's the creator in a sense. He's the sustainer and creator. He's the medium through it. But he would say it's not me, it's him. But yet it all flows through that point. But you can read, there's more about this in Gate of the Heart. I don't know if you've been seeing this Nadir Sa'idi's book called Gate of the Heart, which is about the metaphysical teachings of the Bab. That gets in more detail and has quotes from the writings of the Bab that aren't anyplace else.
I'm actually in his course at UCLA.
Oh, good.
I asked him about it as well, and he told me to read his book. So.
When I was in the Holy Land, I was dealing with the research department and overview of it. And had a lot to do with Nadir there and his discoveries of different things of the writings of the Bab. Amazing.
So can I, just going off of that, you said the primal will, he has the understanding or the knowledge of all the manifestations of God in the universe, or like in all the...
It's a power that the manifestations, wherever they are individually, have access to. It's part of their nature. It's the power that, repeating things, you know, I think I understand this. It's the power of the sovereignty over things, which flows through him. So he finds himself the most powerful, potent controller of everything on the one hand, but if he says he views himself in his individual nature, he's just a bit of dust. So the manifestation himself has, they said people who saw Baha'u'llah, even in Akka, once in a while he would walk in the streets of Akka, with, of course, with some of his followers. And he said the people of Akka, after, this is in our 7th, 8th, 9th year that he's there, because he was shut up at the beginning, nobody ever saw him. Just as he would move through the streets, everyone would spontaneously rise and bow. Dunbars. Just seeing him. And his sweetness and his nature would reach out to them, you know. It's so good to read the stories. You've seen some stories about Baha'u'llah that are from Dear Adib Tarzadi's books that recorded some of the pilgrims who were in the presence of Baha'u'llah. Most extraordinary and hard for us to even just imagine, but it's so good to review those things. And we have some of that in the Dawnbreakers too, the people that, how they reacted to the bomb and the masses of people. There's an intuitive awareness, you know, that goes out and grabs people. And Abdu'l-Baha says the mysterious power of the faith is operating at all times and is transforming the subtle levels of consciousness of men, all unbeknownst to them. So I've seen 50 years in my own life experience in the cause, how now there's a whole younger generation, your own generation, that's come way beyond the kind of racism and ethnic nonsense that was going on when I was a teenager, that was just accepted by everybody. We've gone through this, you know, civil changes, human rights was a concept that was just being born in 1947. You think people talked about human rights before that? Oh, pretty hard. Some people maybe, but this is all, there's a whole change, a sea change of the way people view mankind. When we talked about oneness of mankind in the 50s, what are they talking about now? That's a utopia. That'll never happen. The unity of all the peoples? No, we're so different, we'll never get. Now, you've got one, just the world of sports. Look how united it is all over the world. And how we identify now, because of television and so many other things that are helping us with this, with the humanity of the way people are suffering. Or either they win in a sports competition or they lose. feel exactly. We know what they're feeling. The whole thing is you identify with each other beyond any limitations of class or race or nationality. Those are still potent prejudices that we have to overcome, but that's one of the principles of Baha'u'llah, is to root out those prejudices from ourselves. And it's not just consciously happening in that's happening. It's unconsciously it's going on. You'll see, how humanity comes out in favor of one world more and more. This is the most extraordinary thing. Baha'u'llah pronounces, in the name of the God of the universe, the earth is one country and mankind its citizens. Sounds, that's the, I heard it. I thought, wasn't that sweet? That's nice. No, it's the most revolutionary thing you've ever heard. Because it means that all of us are responsible to see that every member of the human race has equal opportunities to health, to well-being, to the resources. The influence of the resources of the profit of the planet belong to everybody. They don't belong to, I don't want to say the Saudis or something, but one of these places that sitting on a little desert thing and it has oil that is the wealth of mankind, and they have captured it and they believe it's theirs. This is wrong. This is nationalism carried to absurdity. And Baha'u'llah says that humanity has to come together and take steps so that the wealth of the planet will belong to everyone, will serve everyone. It belongs, it's been created by God for everybody. Where did these lines come from, Abdul-Baha said? Who drew them to make these nations that should compete and fight with each other?
Along those lines,
we're non-political, of course, at the same time. We're observers in the process.
Along those lines, I find that so many of our peers, especially young people, are interested and receptive to the concept of spirituality, that it's basically has a very positive connotation. And whether or not you even believe in God, the concept of spirituality is very important. It's considered healthy for you physically and emotionally. And so many of the people I speak to, or my friends, are receptive to this concept of spirituality, even the Baha'i concept of spirituality, but don't see the necessity for the religion aspect of it. And when so many of these teachings, like the equality of men and women, the unity of the races, the need for education, even the unity of the world, so many people are like, well, these are social principles that, yeah, of course we believe in. We have a hard time achieving them, but we believe in them. It's hard to, I'm having difficulty, I guess people don't see the point of religion, per se. And I don't know how to approach that or what to think about it.
Right, that's a big subject. But I think Abdul-Baha has addressed it in numerous talks. The world was not so different when he came along and spoke to the public. I mean, these attitudes of materialistic and we don't need religion or science is enough or whatever. He had to address all of those things. If it isn't in one talk, it's in one of the others. Shoghi Effendi said that we need to master Abdul-Baha's way that he taught the faith in the West. But that's the secret to attracting people. And those of you that are keen readers, I don't want to turn you away from anything because I'm trying to get the idea of reading the writings of the faith more the time that you have. But there is a Baha'i book that's just come out of George Ronald called Islam at the Crossroads by Lame Fananapazi. And this is he's a heart surgeon who's a heart specialist. He's been working on the book for about 10 years. And it's really so solidly placed. He said that it was the tradition of the way his father taught the faith and his grandfather taught the faith and his great-grandfather from the time of the Bab. They presented a very clear vision of the oneness of faith. All the faiths are one. Religions are different, but the faith is one that runs through it all. And so he shows from Jewish scriptures, Christian and Islamic scriptures, exactly the patterns promised and what's happening now and how the Baha'i faith fulfills it. Is a book about that thick.
For the Baha'i side.
Yeah, but the outcome is like, you know, he's shown it to fellow doctors and things. They say, well, there's no way around this. Either you have to accept it or reject it. You can't just say, oh, that's nice or something. This is too solid an argument. And it's the argument of the scriptures. Baha'u'llah says, you know, go back in the scripture, you'll see all these things are confirmed. But it's a headful and a handful to read it and study it. But I heard him, I was in his presence in Washington a couple weeks ago, and he gave it just a simple explanation of it. It's so nice, and it's not pressured or anything. It's just, this is what this says, this is what this says, this is what this says, this is what this says. This is the eternal faith of God, eternal in the past, eternal in the future. Baha'u'llah hasn't come to establish a new religion to compete with the other ones. Baha'u'llah has come to refresh the single faith of God that's been issued by God down through the millenniums. It's a much easier approach to people, you know, that somehow awaken them to the oneness of religion. We still have it very separated in our minds because the people are so separated and battling each other. The great danger is, right now, is that Islam needs to hear these things because it's consolidating itself as a terrific force to fight the great evil in the world of the older religions. And this is not going to go away tomorrow. But if the Baha'is don't teach the faith, then the suffering of mankind gets prolonged. Shoghi Effendi says the cause is on a fixed and immutable course. Fixed and immutable course. The cause is going on. But the speed of it we don't know exactly what part we play in the speed of it. Now, so just as he said this, the other thing that you know very much from the plan is that when we read, we should act on what we read. In other words, our reading shouldn't just be for our own enjoyment. But it's hardly that, because the reading, as far as I understand it, is a spiritual transformation. And the spiritual transformation then will move you to serve and to help other people and to help the cause go forward. The cause goes forward by helping other people. That was this thing that they didn't finish. This institute in Holland said there was a very definite change of life pattern of the people who had these near-death experiences. They all testified that the whole purpose of existence here is to serve others. That the secret of self-mastery, as Abdu'l-Baha is self-forgetfulness, is attending to the needs of other people. And the other thing they said is they're not afraid of death anymore. Having seen what they saw, they know there's this wonderful, pleasant end to our lives here, so they're not afraid of it. But they do want to use the time here to try to build a record of services and kindnesses to others. Do we miss opportunities to help others? Sometimes we see them and we think by the nature of our society or such, we don't do that. Allah says the angels exalt when you sit down next to somebody who's down and out and ask them their histories and hear what they're suffering. Treat them like human beings. They are human beings. You're closer to them than to the people who are living according to their egos. It takes a little bit of courage to do that, because you don't know. Are they drunks? Are they kooks? Are they what? You're going to have to evaluate that. We should be helping people all the time. I think the opportunities, when we think that way, then we see it, the opportunities open up. Little acts of kindness. Nobody needs to know about it. I thought that was quite interesting. They found that universally in the world that the people who've had these experiences have a different outlook on life, trying to help others and know that there's this wonderful end we're all going to.
Sorry, can I just ask you, going back to the progression of the oneness of humanity that you were talking about, and I guess how you portray the faith and how you share the writings and things. I'm just wondering if you've got any views on the use of social media and what people say and do on that. Because obviously, you know, it's I think a lot of people like to use it as an opportunity to share writings and thoughts and things, but at the same time, you don't really have any control over who receives it or how they receive it or how you then describe and explain things that you've posted on.
I think it's evolving right now. Baha'u'llah.org and some of these, they're sources of a lot of enrollments. Lots of people every month are saying they'd like to be Baha'is through that system. It's surprising how many. I think from the enrollments in the United States last year, about 60% were from those sources. So there's more of them, you know. There's several of them out there, and I'm sure, you know, spontaneously they're coming up, and the national assemblies are helping to guide them and indicate things to them. But this is a terrific thing, you know. People hear about the faith. They don't tell you, but they go home, they know, and they can go home and they can look Baha'i up and see what is this, you know. And it's good if we had cards when we're meeting people just on a casual basis on an airplane or something, you know, Baha'i.org or something. Go there and then look for the Baha'i writings there. They can do it. They're not threatened by admitting to you that I might be willing to look at another religion, because it'll spoil my own. Because most of the problem with the people who do follow religion is they're afraid that if they look at another religion, it'll shake their faith. And they don't want to. It's so tenuous anyway. But it has a great role. I think it has a great role. We're in an exploratory period. I wish we were further along with it, but some of the countries have had, you know, regular television programs. We've had this Iranian program that's broadcast into Iran from outside, TV channel, and wonderful stories, and radio as well. I know in Haifa was one interesting thing in the family of non-Baha'is. There were 3 or 4 children in the family, but there were 2 boys about the similar age. And they, one of them began hearing the Baha'i broadcasts on the radio, you know. He realized it was bad that anybody should know it. So he listened to it under the covers in his room for a year. And then he mentioned something among the family about maybe the Baha'is have something to say. And his brother said, I think so, yeah. At the time, his brother had been listening under his bed covers for a year, the same thing. So the 2 brothers found out they embraced the cause together. And there's interesting stories like that. I don't think we have any idea how the Baha'is suffer in Iran. You know, it's a little calmer, but still there's lots of arrests and things. And you don't hear about all the little things, like an older man in a village in the north, in Ruhr. The local store won't sell him anything. So he has to walk some distance to another village. The other village, he doesn't have any family or know anybody. He's able to buy things. But then the ruffians there identify him as the Baha'i that's come from the other village, and they go out and they beat him up all the time. And one case we heard about where they put out their cigarettes in the eyes of the guy. That's not world news. It gets to us, you know. They've gone and arrested a family. All right, they beat them as they're arresting them. They pull the baby off the mother's breast, off the mother, and go to the samovar and stick the mouth of the baby on the samovar and turn the boiling water on until the baby's gone. There's stories that are going to come out in the future. Really horrible things. Horrible human beings. I mean, man has a terrible propensity for evil if it's let loose. And that in the name of religion, I mean, that's really outrageous. You know? You don't think there's any punishment in the next world? Allah says to one of those ministers, you've seen this Goy Fawad that's in the Sons of the Lord of Hosts. The avenging angels of the Almighty are calling, luring the soul of this individual to throw him into the depths of hell. Whoa. We Baha'is, we don't believe in hell, right? So I hear that all the time, Baha'is who don't believe in hell. What we said is that in the fireside teaching that is perpetuated, this is we don't believe in a physical hell. We don't believe there's a place under the earth, inside there with fire, where souls will, when they get buried, will end up there. Okay. Just read the Quran if you want to read about it. I don't know. God is merciful, but to say that He's so merciful that there's no punishment for anything is not fairness and justice. We're not supposed to condemn people, but He's got a system, you know. Pay the consequence, pay the piper. Yes.
Thanks for letting me pick your brain, by the way.
That's okay.
But going back to what you were saying about the current state of the materialism of man, like, you know, with the oil, is nationalism on, like, steroids and at its absolute worst. With that in mind, and with the, one common faith, as well as Pope Francis saying that capitalism and consumer culture creates disadvantage and creates prejudice and stuff like that. Do you think, like, the economic system, like capitalism, in any type of way, has any place in the Baha'i world and society in the future or now? Or
the manifestation has supported individual ownership of property. So that already. But unbridled capitalism, he refers to this thing, excessive capitalism, that's a problem too. But there is an element in the cooperation of labor and capital and the idea of profit sharing, which he introduces, and there's elements there, just hints at another kind of social order. But if your life is organized in such a way that you're thinking how to serve others, that leads by degrees, Abdu'l-Baha says, to spiritual maturity. If you're spiritual mature, he says you need wealth in order to perform philanthropic acts. It's not nasty. The gold we test our fire, we test the gold, and the gold we test the service. Yes, that's true, but once you've got spiritual detachment, you need some means if you're going to be able to perform really substantial acts of service for others. And of course, to be able to contribute to the cause, voluntarily contribute to the cause. So wealth is not necessarily bad. But Baha'u'llah says they have to fix a limit to capital. The capital any individual can have will have a limit fixed in the future.
So it'd be like a fixed level of income.
Yeah, well, fixed. You can't. More wealth than that is not yours anymore. But I don't see that it's going to be very low amount of money. I mean, probably.
Do you think money would have any real existence? I mean, just in the sense of like, to buy like goods and services, but the amount of greed over money. Do you think money will change in its responsibility, in the sense of like it's seen as more of like as something to help uplift others rather than like?
That's interesting. I can't foresee the future myself. Just imagine, but certainly he's going to be with us for a while. Numerical values. I mean, we have proportions of wealth that need to go to by the law of God, get contributed to the faith or to the house of justice at this point. So that's also looks like it's a part of us. We're supposed to earn our livelihoods through the sweat of our brows, through our efforts.
Mr. Dunbar, I have a quick question. When talking about religion, God, and manifestations, when someone responds back saying that they only believe in things that they can see, what's the best answer to give them?
Again, I think you need to survey how the Master dealt with. There were groups that you can understand had that attitude generally. And he introduces the thing very slowly and builds up certain ways of talking about it. I don't know one simple formula. There was a lady, sometimes a question that arises is, well, don't you believe in reincarnation? I mean, I've had a bad life, but I want to come back and have a better one. Well, the woman asked Abdu'l-Baha about that, and he said to her, no merciful God would make a soul pass through this world twice. Not easy for anybody. I mean, if you look at the private lives of the kings and queens and the richest people in the world, they have terrific trials and difficulties. It's just the same as the impoverished ones. It serves its purpose at every level. Why? A mystery. Shoghi Effendi says it's a mystery. Abdu'l-Baha says it's a mystery. Why free will exists, which allows for the development of so many miserable situations in the world. Very backward planet we're living on. Obviously, it's very at a low stage. It says the lowest stage in all of recorded history, the moral level now, which we have psychiatrists telling us is the norm, and we should live it to the full and enjoy. So everything goes downhill. Yes, please.
You raised that question of free will. I've thought about that a few times as well. I seem to think that one of the best answers I thought of or heard is this notion of what the alternative is. Whenever I try and think of an alternative to free will, it never seems to be workable or feasible. What would be the point of a world with no free will? It would just be good. It seems one to me. I don't know what anybody else thinks.
Yeah, it would be automatons. It's like the animal kingdom. I mean, we say, well, how will I know what's the will of God? The will of God is everything around us is the will of God except our own free will. And that one, he says, is there to choose his will. And if you don't, it has consequences. So, apparently we have free will, but Abdu'l-Baha says, he gives a modern parable while he was in Germany. He said, here's a modern parable about free will. He said, think of a train with fixed tracks, and you have the train with the locomotive, and then the cars behind the locomotive. He says is the reasoning power of the soul that goes forward. But the tracks are fixed. The beginning of the track and the end of the track are established. You can read the guidebook for trains and engineer and follow the right pattern to get to the goal, or you can go off on side tracks, or you can go so fast that you tip the train over and ruin it. There's things that can happen, but you don't choose where to be born. You don't choose whether to be a man or a woman. Although some people are thinking we should choose every day what we like to be, but apart from that problem, you don't choose when you're going to die either. Good night. Bye-bye. I think there must be people who would like to get out of here and they're stuck. I don't want to
keep driving to San Diego.
They're driving to San Diego. Okay. Yeah.
Do you have any comments or words of suggestion, guidance regarding racism and human rights in this country?
You know, this is a major situation that I don't think all of us understand very completely. And gradually, the consciousness of it is arising. Life is like a pendulum. You push too far one way, it will go all the way the other way. And racism and slavery and all those things, there's going to be payback, and I think we're going through it. We'll live through it. But in the meanwhile, the people that are disadvantaged because of racial prejudice are not really disadvantaged because they gain through it. They have insights and awarenesses and keenness about the subject that the rest of people don't understand. They understand the oneness of mankind in a different way because it affects so much their own situation, you know. So Shoghi, as you know, called this the most challenging issue that the American public has. And he also said in Pilgrim Notes in the 50s that until the American Baha'is solve this problem, the world's not going to pay any attention. So in ourselves, we have to solve it. He says, how do you solve it? He said, by friendship, by inviting each other to each other's homes, by really being friends, not just meeting at the 19-day feast, not just being polite in an assembly meeting. That's not enough. We need to involve ourselves. And of course, he himself initiated an interracial marriage between two extraordinary souls. I mean, he's so special. Louis Gregory and the woman that he married, it's amazing. But it's not finished yet. I don't know where it's going to go. But we need to become very exemplary in that. And then we have the same. We've got the problem of the cause to a certain degree being overwhelmed in localities by Persian immigrants. That I've seen in South America. It usually takes, but that was the case of pioneers there. But then immigrants came afterwards and became the majority of a community, and they dressed well and were glitzy, and they spoke Persian in the feast, and the Brazilian Baha'is disappeared off the scene altogether. But the children of these people are now the leaders of the faith in the country, outstanding Baha'is. And they understand the Brazilians, and they know the language, and they know the culture, but it's taken a generation. So there's a certain absorption problem. America has that anyway. It's good at absorbing and transforming people into one people. These are situations that the community is facing. You know?
The example you gave is very similar to Los Angeles and the history of the Baha'is here.
There's so many, yeah.
So what specific marching orders
Well, Shogi Effendi said, don't congregate. When you go pioneering, go to new places, distinct places. But that's not so easy, because these people have all not come with the spirit of pioneering. They're immigrants. They've escaped trials and problems, and they want to have a happy life here, and they're looking forward to going back and having a happy life there. And I don't mean to judge them individually, but there is that feeling in the community, you know. So they would just as soon have not left Iran. They're here, and they associate with each other, and they try to keep up the feelings that they had there. And then you have the problem of the local way that Baha'is do in different countries. When they move around, they find that the feast has a different form, or something that they always thought was part of the Baha'i teachings, which was really just a habit of the feasts in that country. It doesn't apply across the board. So all those, it's a learning process, you know. But I think again, if we can awaken the need for spirituality, for the growth in spirituality, for drawing close to Baha'u'llah, these things solve themselves much quicker. If there's no attention to that, we live through this, and we'll have to wait for the next generation and to solve some of these problems, some of these challenges. Shogi Effendi said we should look to the Persians because of the devoted way in which they pray and meditate. They have it right. Well, not all of them have it, but there is that example that we didn't have that in our culture. It needs to come. Please.
Where is that from? Sorry.
Huh?
You said that? Oh, should have been.
I love what you said earlier about, inviting one another into our homes and focusing on things that breed a unity that is organic and is natural and comes from because it's so easy to want to solve a problem by taking sides and determining the rights and the wrongs and addressing them. And to an extent that needs to be done, obviously needs to be identified, those things need to be identified. But it all comes from that sort of simple strand of love in terms of actually wanting to solve an issue, wanting to be the people that you seem to feel are against you on the issue. If you anything other than starting with that love, I think inevitably leads to a cold or divisive or at least ultimately unfruitful or unproductive result, even if you're right, quote unquote, with your identification of an issue or the problem that exists. So I really am heartened when I see people getting together, making efforts to welcome one another, regardless of the issue, whatever it is, whoever's on the other side of it. I feel like that's really what's in the Baha'i spirit.
My wife were here, she'd probably have some things to say. She's been reading a number of books by African Americans about their view of their take on the present situation of racism, and also what it means. Some other books about what it means to be white and the implications of that. And she said this should be required reading for the Baha'is, at least to open their minds to whole areas of sensibilities that we don't think about, and that sometimes the other race thinks that we are aware and we don't care, but there's also a lot of unconsciousness, you know. I mean, she was quoting one thing from a book. They were saying, that parks in America are for everybody. Parks in your town, you go walk in the park and you like to walk in the park, it's very pleasant. But that's not the case for black people. Black people walk in the park, it's a white man's park. They have to see the condition in the park, to look at how people treat each other and whether there's acceptance there or not, or how they might find themselves in an embarrassing situation. It struck me that I never thought of that, but the atmosphere is not all the same all over the country. Actually, Sacramento's got a pretty good record for living up near Sacramento. I happen to land there. And it's got the record of being the most ethnically diverse community in the country. Not Baha'i community, non-Baha'i community. Just the city. And also it's the one place where you have a whole range of ethnic elements living at all the different economic levels. They haven't formed ghettos. They're all mixed together. It's an interesting philosophy. Yeah.
Can you give us a bit of description about your life and your experience as a former member of Universal Massachusetts? How that life will service, like, your vision on board and all that.
Wow. We'll have a 1-week seminar on that next week. Okay. That's a kind of a tall order. I don't know. Good night. Thank you. You know, well, obviously that has a terrific effect. I mean, just being at the center of the cause and having these thousands of pilgrims coming through all the time, meeting them and hearing their experiences and seeing the growing awareness of the oneness of the Baha'i world that comes out of that, which gets punctuated in ever more dramatic ways at the international Baha'i conventions that, you know, where the house is elected. That's really special. The experience in the chamber itself, it's a very unifying feeling that members discuss things until there's good understanding about what's to be done. 22 years I served on the House of Justice, and I was a party to 2 votes. That's the only time in 22 years we had 2 times that we voted. And I won't tell you what the issues were. That means there was close to unanimity on everything. We talk it through until you had a clear vision of where we were going, why we needed to go there. That was an amazing experience. Maybe some of the Baha'is think there's a little flashing light when you get it right. It says, da, 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 da. Okay, we can go on now. We got it right. No, it's like consultation. It sounds like a local assembly, but the outcome is different.
How could you overcome that? I guess I'm assuming that you felt a lot of pressure on, like, having that responsibility.
Having what?
Having this responsibility, you know.
Yeah, that's kind of, you don't go there, you know, so heavy that you just try to not think about that. Why me? Like, you know, the election of every new member. Why me? And then the other members saying, why him? They didn't choose him. You try not to feel that either, but there's a little bit of that in the air, like, well, he doesn't know how to operate yet, and it takes a while. It takes some years to kind of get into the... I was really fortunate because 15 years on the teaching center from its inception, before I became a house member, meant I was reading all the house's correspondence, the incoming things, and then the house's answers to all matters related to propagation and protection, which was pretty much everything. I mean, okay, individual comportment and what do you do when a Baha'i murders somebody, and all those terrible things that came to the chamber. Somebody asks, I've become a Baha'i and I've matured, 10 years or so. What do I do about having seen my parents sacrifice children in satanic rituals when I was 10 and 11 years old? People have lived through horrible things in this. Think of Africa, the problems. All these child soldiers and things, right? Just horrible things. Something good has to come out of everything. There's something in one of the talks of the Master. He said if God is so merciful that if it's a sincere believer, even if when they make mistakes, God uses them for the good of the cause. So I may have contributed something. I may have taken myself well. I probably made some mistakes. Hope he's made something good out of it. You know, the House of Justice is wonderful. What an amazing institution. You don't need to pray for the House of Justice. Baha'u'llah and Bob have it right on top of you. But the members need prayers. The members can use your prayers for strength, steadfastness, and endurance. Before every convention, international convention every 5 years, sometimes you see some errant soul traveling a little bit too much and contributing things here and there, and you realize that they would never admit that it's campaigning, but it sure looks like that from the top. And I think that the punishment for those people is that they should become house members for 3 months. Realize that there's nothing here of glory in that sense. It's just hard, very hard, constant labor. More self-effacing, better, but that's not easy, that all that experience and time. How many of you have been on pilgrimage? Some of you, wow, look at that. You've been to the heart of it. You've been to the threshold of Baha'u'llah. What a different spirit in each of the 3 shrines. Amazing, that between the Bab and Abdu'l-Baha and Baha'u'llah. So marked. People have been there and talk about that. So I'm preaching to the choir tonight, huh? You guys have all been on pilgrimage, you've all thought about these things, and say, okay, he's confirming what I already know, but that's good.
Can you tell us a little about the differences of the spirits that you felt?
Huh?
Can you tell us a little bit about the differences that you felt between the shrines?
It evolved over the years, but the initial one, I was young and I'd been elected to the National Assembly of Nicaragua. And 27 years old. I was a delegate to the first convention in '63, so I saw the actual coming into being of the House of Justice. Amazing. And I visited the shrines for the first time in connection with that experience. And to me, there's something, you can find some reminiscence of this where Shoghi Effendi at the beginning of the dispensation, and also to some degree in the forward that God passes by, he describes the 3 central figures. And he talks about the character of their spirit. And that corresponds with the shrines. This vibrating power of the shrine of the Bab, this overwhelming power, you don't know what to do with it, And you feel so humbled by it. And then you go to the shrine of Abdu'l-Baha and you're comforted because the Master accepts everything. And it's wonderful history in the cause of people going into the presence of Abdu'l-Baha, and they see that with his glance he sees through everything. He knows everything about you. And it breaks the people. Sometimes it's too powerful. In the case of May Maxwell, he said, take her back, take her to a distance from me. It's too powerful for her. Very blessed soul. But then they hear the Master speaking, okay, you're breaking down and weeping, that's your problem. But he's still speaking with the other pilgrims and he's talking, and you see the kindness that's flowing from him. And then when you lift your head again, you see he looks at you, and he knows everything, but it doesn't matter. He sees the future, he sees the potentiality. And it's such a relief to the people. He loves you anyway. That's so special discovery for people, I think. Maybe the shrines, in a sense, that also, in the absence of the central figures, you go to the shrine and you feel, he knows how little I have to bring. And remember occasions when I would go to Baji and I would say, Baha'u'llah, I brought you some more shortcomings. Would you very kindly accept them, please? Relieve me of them. So you have that power there, and you have this wonderful hug from Abdu'l-Baha and acceptance no matter what you are. And then you have this peace. At Baji, you have this majesty and peace and glory. I don't know, that's the way I viewed it anyway. There's a tablet of Abdu'l-Baha. He says, the greatest service you can do for another soul is to remember them at the shrine of Baha'u'llah. Isn't that beautiful? Should we list and all the different people want.
Last time I went there, I had a list literally about 150 people, all of whom I made the mistake of telling I was going to.
Oh,
so then I literally had to go through one by one.
Yeah, that's good. But you named their names in the shrine.
Yes.
And there's a house does when they pray. When you say they pray for you, they've mentioned your name in the shrine. In one of the shrines, either Dunbar or Baha'u'llah. It was getting a little bit much. People were writing and saying, put my name on the list. No, they said you have to write and ask the House of Justice if they would pray for you. Not put your name on a list. It's not that kind of a thing, you know? Yes, a list results from it, but it's not like, can you just put me on every week?
Could you please speak a little bit about living a life of sacrifice while finding balance in our lives, and what selfless sacrifice looks like?
I suppose that each one has to kind of discover that path for themselves. You have the stories. You look at the Dunbars. If you haven't read that recently, read it again. It'll give you parameters. Why is their level of sacrifice different from ours? It's just that we're hidebound a bit by the society around us and how that views not being fanatic or not being, But where there's love, it's, the people that say the sacrifice is really not sacrifice. In the end, it becomes it's a bounty from God that we can give ourselves. He allows us. And He doesn't allow us to do that unless it's selfless, to some degree selfless. It goes by stages, but doesn't... I don't think He takes martyrs that are afraid and don't want to be martyrs. There are a number of tablets. People ask Baha'u'llah, I want to be a martyr, can I be a martyr? And he said, yes, you'll be a martyr, or no, you won't be a martyr. Tablets will be going back and forth, and letters back and forth on that subject. One of them was Adib Tarzade's father, Tahir Malmir, who was in Yazd, and he kept begging Baha'u'llah to be a martyr. No, he said, you must live a long time to teach the cause. He lived a long time. He conceived Adib when he was 70. And I went to Yazd in 73, and Mr. Zabihian, who was a cousin of Adib, was the board member for protection. He took me to the holy places, some holy places. And while we were at the house of Malmir, which is kind of boarded up, but we got a key and went in without incident, except one little boy that came skipping down the lane between these buildings, kind of a dark street. When he saw us putting the key in the door, he said, "Hooney Bobby, Hooney Bobby, Hooney Bobby," and he ran down the street. It's a Bobby house. How can you? You're not going to go in there, are you? You could see the terror in his, hear it in his voice. And then from the mosque nearby, the session ended, and it asked for the blessings of God on Muhammad, the messenger of God, and a curse on the Malmere dog. This is 1973. The guy's been dead 20 years, and still the ending because he was such a presence. And because he followed that city, he'd have to live a long life to serve the faith. He couldn't care less. He provoked the clergy something terrible, and they couldn't catch him. He'd escape every time. Midnight meetings in his home continually. They'd send people to kill him, poison the tea. So one guy he was going there to the meetings for a long time, and then he asked for the honor of serving the tea one night. So he said, okay. So he wiped poison in one of the cups and put it there for Malmere to drink. That night, he always drank tea after tea while he was making the explanation. So that night, he didn't touch it. Uninterested. So the guy said, "You're not drinking the tea, it's getting cold." He said, went on talking, ignored it. I think the guy finally became a Baha'i. That's why we know the story, because So, what's the measure? You have to find the measure in your own self. I think we all have different degrees of it. Nobody seems to have ever been unhappy from it. I met a man in New York. Said he was among the prisoners that were to be shot in Shiraz, in a prison outside of Shiraz. And they marched them out to shoot them, and he said, "Baha'u'llah, I'm not really too keen about this, kind of. I'm not going to be a martyr, He said that over our heads a storm developed in the desert stillness of Shiraz. Out of nowhere, these clouds came, and a terrific downpour of rain came, which so startled the guards and the officials that they all ran. Everybody ran to get out of this rain. And he said, I ran to a derelict structure on the edge of the walls and jumped through a window in there and fell through a hole in the floor in the back into a gulch and made my way out to the road before they could figure out what happened. And a car saw me there and picked me up and understood that I was escaping and said, stay on the floor of the car and the front seat, and here I am in New York. I don't think he wants to. You know what he says in the Seven Valleys? He said that the falcon, the hawk, doesn't prey on a dead mouse. They look for live mouse. He uses that with connection. If you want the supreme falcon to sacrifice you, to take you, you've got to be alive for that to happen, not a dead mouse. Useless.
That's a good question.
Okay.
It's been a while that this topic kind of bothers me. Destiny.
Destiny?
Yes. I wanted
Destiny
to know
bothers all of us, I think.
What is destiny? And yeah, if things happen in life, it's meant to be like that. For example, let's say if you have a car accident, is it meant to be like that? Is it that was your destiny? Was there any way that you could prevent that from happening? Or
many examples of that.
Yeah.
Like being here in LA, like having you tonight here. Are we controlling things? Can we control things? Can we prevent things from happening? Or
Don't invite me back.
it's a pleasure to have you here. But all these questions, like Baha'u'llah's son dropped from the ceiling, passed away. Was it destiny? Was it? You know, I don't know exactly how to ask this question, but
no, you're asking very well.
All these thoughts come to my mind, and I really don't
it's a
have an
puzzle
answer
for you.
Yeah.
It's a puzzle for me. It's a puzzle for all of us. We don't know exactly. You know, you never know what. You see, he says the tests of God visit, or the tests. We have tests and calamities. He said some sent by God and some caused by our own ignorance and foolishness. So there's the two possibilities. We like to think it's all sent by God, but on the other hand, you know, were you driving carelessly that day, or he says that there's oil in the lamp of the human soul, so that there's a fixed amount. When it's finished, it's finished. Afterwards, it's done. But there is such a thing as a wind coming and blowing the light out before it uses up its oil. So I don't find any exact way to be sure on this question of destiny. You can there are two predestined things. One is a fixed one. Baha'u'llah explains there's a tablet in the Gleams about it to a woman who's lost a child. This fixed thing, and another one is pending. The pending one you can change. The fixed one you can't do anything about it. It's you're going to die when you're going to die, or whatever. But the other one is a pending one. Through prayer, you might avert some difficulties and calamities. But then Abdullah, on another tablet, he himself says, you must learn to trust in God. But trust in God, you have to believe in God, you have to turn to Him, you have to depend on Him, not just trust in God like that. I mean, he says if you do that, everything will be smooth in your life. Then you know that whatever comes to this is part of the plan of God. He says there's other souls that don't. They pray. They ask God, oh God, you know, I really want this job, or I really want this woman to be my wife, or can you just do it for me? And Abdullah says he does it. But it doesn't come out well. If you trust in God, if you hold and trust in God, that's the best. He said that's the best system. But we want to do things, you know, create new circumstances, and we fuss around a lot about it. But if we concentrate ourselves on this, how to live the life, how to acquire thirst for spirituality, then all these other things which are meant to move us in that direction they take a proper balance, it seems to me, in our lives. I don't know. Paul was complaining, St. Paul, that he had a thing stuck in his side that he couldn't get out. You know? I don't know, was it a thorn or something? It constantly bothered him. And he would want it to be removed somehow. He said instead of that, God gave him the strength to withstand it, and it didn't matter, and he didn't need it removed. This is symbolic of some afflictions that we have in our lives, certain things, certain shortcomings, certain we wish we didn't have, and yet there's some wisdom in that in our makeup. But it can always be transcended by the spiritual root. That's the removal of all our problems. There's a line in a tablet that's cited also in the Wings, which says basically, all good comes from God, and all evil from your own selves. All it says. I found that very significant in the sense you can read it the other way around. You say, no good comes from anything but God. And only evil comes from yourself. Nothing good ever comes from you. We're just that kind of in our natural, unreformed state until we're educated by the Word of God. We're just really bad gents, bad problems. And you know that we don't like to do that because we like to think of ourselves as I've made some great accomplishments. Look at me, I was in the Holy Land. Wow. I'm an ex-everything, you know, right? Along the line, suddenly I'm out of the job, I'm arranging my papers, and I find a tablet of Baha'u'llah, and it says, the service of the friends belongs to God, not to them. Finished. Whole thing gone, you know. Back to my old evil self again. So what is this? In other words, if we do something good, if we do a service, if we take pride in it, it loses its value. If we recognize that, thank you, merciful God, that you've assisted me to do something, there's been some service, and the service, it really belongs to you. Look what he says. He says, you should raise yourself up to such a point and refine your spiritual life to a degree so that he can use you to speak to others. Then you're speaking and people say, how is it you answered the question that I had in my mind and I never asked it? They said that about the guardian. You know, he constantly was answering people's questions at the table or walking with the Persians to the shrines. He's read my mind. I had that question. It isn't that there's an awareness of the question. It's just that the guardian was an instrument and it immediately responded to people. There's some other power that knows exactly what we're thinking. You think we don't have any private thoughts. Not with that guy that's noting them all down. Mr. Furtan, Mr. Qazi, that's the hand of the cause, Jalal Qazi, he was a veterinarian. And he lived amongst the tribes in Iran and so on. And when pilgrimage opened, there were 10 years there were no pilgrims, from 41 to 51. There was the World War, and then there was the War of Independence in Israel. The War of Independence in Israel, all this interrupted. There was the corruption of the guardian's family, the expulsion, the violation of his mother and father of the covenant. My God, what the guardian suffered. He never said that to anybody. He never buried them in the Baha'i cemetery, and he put their initials on the tombstone. Everybody else has this eulogy from on high of the mother and father of the guardian man. And it was so bad that Khan said, please don't bury me in that cemetery where the enemies of the guardian are. And the house took special efforts to place her, in front of the master's house. That was required government approval from the highest levels to do that. You don't just bury people anywhere. Usually it has to be in a cemetery. So Mr. Qazi was coming on pilgrimage with Mr. Khadim. Both of them destined to become hands of the cause in the future. And they were the first two Persian pilgrims after all this time, 10 years. One of the wonderful things that happened was that one of the relatives of the Bab, who had become the heir to the original Igan that the uncle of the Bab had received from Baha'u'llah in Abdullah's handwriting, with some additional notes from Baha'u'llah's own hand in it. That had been contributed by her to the National Assembly to give to the guardian. And he'd said it can't be sent. It has to be hand-carried. This was during the 40s. So as soon as they were coming, he sent a message that Mr. Qadim should bring the originally gone within for the archives. So Mr. Qazi is going to go along, and he's heard the people say how the guardian reads your thoughts. And he said, I don't know whether I should go or not. He said, sometimes I have thoughts, I don't know. I can't control my thoughts. And if he's going to see what they are, this is going to be very embarrassing and difficult. And so he hesitated, and they said, well, you'll go, the guardian is loving, and you go. So he said, decided to take a chance, and he came. He said the first day we went with the guardian came and took us to the shrine of the Bab. Talked to us as we were walking there. And we went in the shrine, and the guardian went forward and himself chanted the tablet of visitation. The sign of God on earth is chanting the visitation in the shrine for you, Pretty nice. So he said, we stood at the back, one on each side. And then the guardian finished, and he prostrated himself, and then he backed out. And as he backed out, we were looking at each other like, what do we do? Here's the sign of God is going to pass by us. Do we face him, or do we face the threshold? How are we going to do this? Mr. Qazi was also fairly portly, I'm waiting to hear what he says, and he says, well, we half-halved it after the shrine, So he went out, put his shoes on, he was walking, we went forward and prostrated ourselves at the shrine, and then we came out and we had to put our shoes on. And the guardian, quiet for a moment, and then he said, the station of the shrine is very great, he said. The friends don't understand the station of the shrine. He said, we knew which friends he was talking about. That was clear. Then he began quoting from Baha'u'llah as we followed him around to the front of the shrine. Quoted Baha'u'llah about the greatness of the shrine, the greatness of the Bab, and he ended with the fact that he said, all the saints and holy ones, the messengers of the past, circle around the blessed shrine of the Bab. He said, at that point, he said, I lost it. I thought to myself, what's left for Baha'u'llah then, if everybody's here? Then he stopped. Turned around, he said, and looked right in my eyes, and smiled, and he said, and then he said, the Bab and all those that circle around him, circle around Baji. Of course, spiritually, that's all right. Physically, it sounds impossible, but spiritually, you can do this. Just immediately answered him. So he was, after that, very cautious. Hey guys. What time is it? 10:30. There's more food up there. There's each other to talk to. Thanks for your attention tonight. It's been a pleasure to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you.